long as Felix, probably 8 years. I haven't checked before. Yeah, it was similar. So I needed Wi-Fi to get to the internet, and yeah, when I saw these routers which can do more than the other things, and bought it, and yeah, I got into this thing, and yeah, now I'm also working for Intel in the Connected Home division. So we saw the talk from Olaf and Sham before. Yeah.
Hi, I'm John. I started doing OpenWrt because I accidentally ran into Felix because he lived close to me, and then we started doing OpenWrt, which is a long time ago now.
Hi, I'm Imre. Actually, I started doing OpenWrt together with Mike Baker in the beginning. Long story short, I needed a solution where I could limit the bandwidth of my little sister. And this actually ended up being the project that we are working on today.
Hi, my name is Zoltán. I started soldering serial consoles for Imre to play around with in 2005, and then ported the OpenWrt to small development boards in 2012 or so.
Hi everybody, my name is Luka. I started playing with OpenWrt since I was not satisfied with the quality of the router stack that I had in my home at the time. So I found the project and got involved.
Okay, so now as you look out into this room and you see how many industries and projects and communities and how much impact you've made around the world from India and everywhere else, think about where OpenWrt LEDE has come, and think about where you want it to go. And my first question is, where do you see it? Where do you see this project? What does it look like from your perspective 3 to 5 years out? And you all get to answer.
So for me personally, I don't have any big vision for the OpenWrt project. One thing that I hope for it to continue to be and to improve on is to be kind of the point to go to if you want to work with free software for embedded devices, and especially in the Wi-Fi space, but I hope that we can also expand to other areas like IoT or whatever else comes up. For me personally, I don't work towards one big vision in what you can do with it, but I try to just improve the general availability of free software for the things that people care about.
I hope that we get closer to upstream in the next 3 years and more stuff upstream and have less patches and support more standards like Wi-Fi, roaming, handovers, things like that.
I really hope that we, well, as John said, we will do more upstream work, and using that, I believe that OpenWrt will sooner or later become an industry standard, and we could actually help and force companies to work better with the community on the long run.
Yeah, basically I would like to add some comments to Felix, is that there are a lot of other non-networking or slightly networking related industries where OpenWrt could expand. Should that be either maybe even media players, automotive industry, stuff like that. There is a large appetite in the automotive industry for security, and probably is using embedded systems easily. That's something where we could expand.
Since we started doing this Purple OpenWrt Summit, I remember that we started in a small room. I think you mentioned it in Düsseldorf, then Dublin, a bit bigger conference and so on. So it's great to see more and more people getting involved. It's also great with the LEDE project that more new people came on board to the project, that they started collaborating, and I just hope that the community will grow even further. That's excellent.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I agree with all what they said. So, yeah, I think it would be also nice if you have more industry collaboration in there. Not only so currently there's lots of, so I saw here lots of talks from companies using OpenWrt, but I see not all of these companies are really contributing or are really active in contributing. I would hope that this would change, that companies also try to get their stuff supported upstream. So at best in the upstream kernel, when it's for SOCs, like John said, and the rest in OpenWrt.
Okay, so now I'm looking out into the room, and don't be shy. What questions do you have for our panelists up here? There's one. Art.
So everybody knows me, Art. So what you probably don't know is on the side from working at the Purple Foundation, I'm also in graduate school in cybersecurity. And I'm actually working on a project right now on the security of OpenWrt. So what an opportunity to ask the key developers in the community, what do you see as the most important things we could do to improve upon security in OpenWrt?
Okay, so the main problem with security is actually getting into the router. So most of our services exposed to the internet run with root access. We have a jailing system which allows you to use seccomp to jail the services, but that's not really that optimal. So I had a chat with Felix recently that we were considering to build little stubs, like an iNet daemon, which seccomps itself without having to use a jail and works as a proxy and does like verification of, let's say, DHCP and DNS packets. So recently we saw the exploits in the DHCP server and DNS mask, and those could be mitigated by simply having like an intelligent front end. The way it would work is that the proxies at the start would pick up the incoming data and then push the actual replies out over UBus, and then only have the, let's say, DNS server answering UBus and sending back the replies, and then those getting sent out via our little proxies. So you have like this minimal tool running inside seccomp as nobody, ideally with a jailed file system, and that way even if you manage to somehow get in, then you're stuck with stuff getting converted to JSON and back. And at that point you get to the point where the actual security is how secure is the JSON-C library. Is there like an overflow in there? But if we manage to funnel all the low traffic data through JSON, then it should work. So the theory. That's one thing. The other thing is that obviously you need to have continuous updates. So if you don't think about OpenWrt as you install it and it's secure, but keeping it secure is also important. So you also have the industry problem that your off-the-shelf plastic routers get built, sold with a firmware that's once built and you don't really get updates. So if you look at OpenWrt security and what's actually deployed en masse and not built by community members, then this is kind of like an industry problem that needs to be resolved on like a political level, I guess, which we can't really fix in software. Yeah.
I would like to quickly add something. One thing that I notice very frequently in the industry is the way that security is being treated. In many ways, I see security as something that people consider to be a feature to add on top, and this also is also reflected in the way that it is implemented. So it's always like adding another layer of virtualization, adding some fancy extra space detection of. For me, what I consider the most important aspect in security is actually reducing complexity, and I think this is something that has to be considered from the start. We see it in many implementations, even those built on OpenWrt, that people just add layers upon layers of code that nobody will ever review properly, that nobody really can estimate the security implications of. And one thing where I really would like to see improvement is to just keep designing better and more simple services where you can look at the code and it's mostly obvious that it should be correct. And maybe we can see some improvement there in the future.
I'd also like to add on the security topic. So, based on my experience, there is a big difference when you build something as a community and the way the products are made with the deadlines and everything. So it's also a matter of process and how to set up the workflows with the testing and everything, and have quality products out there that are actually updated and not once shipped and then forgot about them.
Question right down here. Yeah, so security is a big deal. Maybe there could be, I don't know, some...
It's in relation to what Felix attempted to answer in the previous question. So you talked about additional code being added without consideration to security. So whatever code is existing today in OpenWrt, so as Intel, when we are providing this code to customers, they are scanning this code and coming up with some reports on this one. Has there been an effort to put this kind of code into an external third-party security audit? Has there been any voluntary request to audit this and give a recommendation about this one, the OpenWrt code in itself?
I'm not aware of any specific audits by actual people reviewing the code, except what we do on a day-to-day basis when we try to clean up what we did before and take a good look at it again. One thing that we have going on is a coverity scan of, I guess, most of the core components of OpenWrt.
Okay, and these coverity scan reports are available for companies which want to use it in their own secure development lifecycle methodologies, right?
I don't know if it's available to companies as well, but primarily it's available to us, so we can start fixing those issues that show up there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we've got like a login for open source projects to use that tool. There have been audits. If you look at the DNS mask problems which happened like 4 weeks ago or something, that was an audit paid, I think, by Google. Well, I don't know if they actually did it themselves, I think. So that's one of the third-party applications that we use, which is obviously one of the services which I mentioned earlier on, which is directly exposed to the internet. So with the tools that we build ourselves, we know the code, and normally there's like 2 or 3 people know the code, and we look over each other's patches, so we kind of do like a review and audit ourselves of that stuff, plus what Felix just mentioned, but it's mainly the third-party tools which are the attack vectors, I guess.
For this, you also have to look at, what's the attack vector, what John just said. So is it, so for example, what passes some random data which is coming from the internet, like DNS mask, which has a much higher attack vector. For example, when you see PROC-D, which just darts processes and doesn't get some data from the bad internet.
Are there any companies in the audience who do scans or security audits of your particular variant of OpenWrt that you could get your companies to do some of the core trunk? Anything? Maybe? You do? Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, our implementation, right, what we programmed into it, so we do security hacking attacks to make sure we're secure.
Yeah. So if any companies are doing the core components, they could, Shelley, right up there, there's a question. Okay. Well, it's just for the live stream that we're trying to do the mics.
Thanks. The interesting point here would be to state that when people are developing services and software, that baseline best practices like OWASP, application security verification standards, are public. So people should start developing their products in accordance to best practices, which are really public. And second thing we need is when a product is mature enough to see open penetration testing reports, open security reviews. For instance, there are application security companies that do instant messaging, like Signal, like Wire, that publish openly their security reviews. So that's one thing that the community should work towards. So let's see the statement, what are we doing in terms of security, and also let's see what are we doing to make this as open as possible. Thanks.
There's a question up in that there, and then one more down here, and then one up there.
Hey, so I've been working on WRT for about 5 months, and I think one of the big productivity drains for our team is the real kind of scattered wiki, and like the documentation is not that kind of clear. So I was just kind of wondering what kind of what kind of focuses do you have towards improving documentation and like the overall like kind of learning curve for beginners?
Hello. So this was a challenge that I found myself in when new guys started coming in the company and so on. So we basically started also some kind of internal documentation, and throughout that work also started to clean it up, and we have a work in progress book that I hope we will be able to publish in a relatively quick manner. But in general, with documentation, it's a problem that people like to do other things than documentation, so it's a challenge on that front. I think everybody can agree here on that point.
Will you be able to publish the content online?
I'm thinking what would be the best way to do it.
I talked to...
have not decided yet.
Okay. Because I've talked to authors recently, and what they tell me, many of these authors, is when they publish their content freely and openly online, they sell more books. Just so you know, you actually publish all your content online, and lo and behold, because people find it in Google searches and people find it online, and they want to buy the book for somebody else or whatever, they actually sell more books when the content is available.
Thank you.
So the other problem with documentation is not just generating the documentation, but actually keeping it alive. So if you write documentation, the moment you finish writing the documentation, it's pretty much outdated. We had a chat with a couple of industry players about this about 3 months ago, and did some estimations, and I think that to fully document OpenWrt, including all its APIs and UBus calls and what the services do and so on, that's like a full-time job of probably 6 to 9 months if you started doing that with one person who already knows all the details. And after that, it's pretty much another full-time job to keep that documentation alive. So it's really, the documentation is mainly a problem of funding at the moment, especially because lots of people are doing this in their hobby time. So the time they have, they invest into coding. So that's on the technical side. Obviously, there's the, let's call it user side, explaining how to set up your router, flash your router, and so on. So that's community-driven inside the wiki. At the moment, we've got the problem that due to the reboot, we have 2 wikis, which we're going to discuss on how to remerge them while we're here. And then we're going to see how to move from there. Inside the LEDE project, there's now a documentation team of, I think it's like 4 people, 5 people now? 3, I don't know. It works so well that nobody really keeps an eye out because they just do a great job. And the documentation, I mean, we had like, Yo pasted me a link a few days ago about like, hello world, OpenWrt, and there's like this really good document explaining how to like literally get started from, I've never used a wireless router before and I want to flash my own firmware onto it. And he's like, did you even know we had this? And I said, no. So there is documentation, people are working on it, it's a problem, but there are various levels of how this can be created, and it basically involves a lot more work than people would expect.
I think that's an area where even if it could be industry funding, you know, of a foundational piece, that documentation could be one of those pieces that could be funded, the pieces that people don't want to pick up on their own. Next question, right back there.
Hi. Yeah.
No, there's one more before you. Sorry, Santa. Okay. Hold on.
So, well, I was going to ask about the contributions and the capacity to learn about the OpenWrt has like a really steep curve learning. So apart from documentation, I have seen that, for example, now you have added some tutorials in the LEDE docs and how to build an app and package it and distribute it, which is really helpful because most of the times you are not actually modifying the system, but actually doing apps over OpenWrt. What other steps do you see in the future you could be doing?
Do you mean other steps into building the documentation, or?
No, outside of documentation, like to try to lower the learning curve.
Okay, well,
yeah,
at the end of the day, it's a really technical thing that we're doing, and it's not really a end consumer software. And with any kind of software, we have the inherent problem that you need to have some kind of technical skills and understanding of what you're doing that you need to bring along. So you can try to reduce the amount of syntax or so on, but the more simple we make like the build system, the less corner cases we can cover. So there needs to be some sort of complexity to cover all the corner cases, because if you think about like the thousands of packages that we build, there's like 100 build systems that they use, different types of autoconf and CMake and homemade scripts and lots of weird stuff, and you can't cover all that by just simply having a dummy template that just runs for everything. So personally, I think it's already pretty simple. I mean, I've worked with far worse build systems over the years, where even if you are trained in these tasks, you need quite a lot of time to get it working, because it's just really small details that you have to worry about, which aren't even that apparent. So obviously, I mean, I think that OpenWrt is great and it's easy to use. Yeah, so wrong person to ask, really.
And one other thing that that we're working on, I already added support for a really simple version where you can just run make check and it'll check the make files in the system for errors. So the only errors that I implemented for now are if the download hash is missing or wrong, because that was the most frequent source of errors that we always had to catch by hand. And now somebody else who's a member of the LEDE team will want to work on extending that to add more checks on the make file, so we can simply add things that we see frequently that are wrong in make files that people contribute, and hopefully people can just check their own stuff themselves before they submit it. I think this will also lower the barrier to entry a bit.
Okay, Sento?
Hi.
To the mailing list and then create a wiki account and start documenting stuff, really. It's all inside a wiki and anyone can freely edit that.
Okay.
Yeah, and on the wiki you can find the names of the people that are leading the documentation team, and so you can contact them specifically, but also keep the mailing list informed as well, so that the people in the project see what's going on and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
So I wanted to ask a question. It's the third time I come to the OpenWrt Summit, and I'm seeing that we are growing both as an event but also as a community, but we're also growing of age, you know, like, so have you started thinking on how to attract the younger generations that, you know, for them it's very easy to start coding, but to get to the low level of Linux and networking, it's very hard for them. So have you ever thought about this, and how can we attract them so that we can have the next generation ready for when we won't be here anymore?
Yeah, one of the sponsors out there has that Tetris played on routerless. That's a good way. That's a good start.
You said a sponsor is doing what?
There is a Tetris game played on router LEDs. So that's probably a good way to start.
Tetris with LEDs. I was going to say free hardware.
Yes.
That would all.
Yeah, I think
And online
everyone-
training.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think everyone can contribute themselves by going to their local makerspace or whatever local computer meetup, hand out some hardware and get people infected. That's what I do. When I go to places and there's young people, I just give them hardware and just say, look, this is how you do cool stuff with it. And then 1 in 10 comes back and works.
Another question here.
Hi. I would like to ask, where do you see the majority of development effort between those LEDE and OpenWrt projects after the projects split? I'm asking mainly because we have a project that kind of depends on the development version of OpenWrt, and can we expect anytime soon a new stable release of OpenWrt?
So I think it's going into the direction of the LEDE and OpenWrt merged. I assume so. So at least, yeah, we had the LEDE project at the release with 17.1 release in end of January, and yeah, at least there are plans to do for the next release. Hopefully in a merged project. At least we agreed on this some months ago, and yeah, it's currently going on. So we, so currently on the mailing list there are the discussions about merging the patches which are in the OpenWrt repository but missing in the LEDE repository and yeah, so I don't know exactly if so our track record on doing announcing a release date and actually sticking to it is pretty bad. And so I cannot promise you any release date for the next version, yeah, but at least we are working on it.
So the target you said was January?
So one thing that we also did as part of the LEDE project is we figured that the biggest reason why we failed to do releases over and over again is because of the basically insane amount of manual work required to build and prepare the release. And one thing that we've done is we've simplified this part a lot by having a build-bot instance that actually builds the release instead of manual scripts that are run by people. And so we've kind of reduced the amount of redundant work necessary for each release, and hopefully we'll be able to release closer to the time that we actually plan to release.
Yeah, and as a result of building that build-bot infrastructure, we've been able to, with the DNS mask exploits which came out and the Wi-Fi exploits which just happened, we were able to push updated 17.01 releases binaries within like 3 or 4 days. So that part's already working. To get a new stable release running, I think the main problem right now is that not all targets are on the same kernel version. Hauke did some work on Athros, I think.
Yes, I tried to port at least one, but yeah, there are bugs. At least Felix said he fixed some. I only fixed one of the NAND drivers. Felix fixed now the other 3, and yeah. So I think we now most of it important targets are on 3.9, but yeah, there are probably still bugs on it.
Question over there.
Hi. As far as I remember, UCI has always been the backend to store configuration, and a configuration export has always been a tar.gz dump of UCI basically. But when I see a project which is based on OpenWrt, they always create their own conversion layer to make their own config file. I mean, we do it ourselves, so I'm wondering why is that, and could the config or a config layer be introduced to allow easier export of stuff you want to export or not export?
Well, one of the reasons I think why this happens so frequently is UCI was built by me a very long time ago, and since then I've learned a lot of things about what to do and what not to do, but I haven't really had the time or the ideas on how to come up with a really good system to replace it. There's always people that are proposing various new ways of configuring things, but I guess most of the time it has always been tailored to their use cases, and it's hard to simply completely switch to a new system that doesn't consider like the wider ecosystems. So one of the really big challenges here is to come up with a new system that replaces it, that supports all the things that people need, which we actually don't have a real list for. We don't have a list of things that are the main concerns of people with UCI. We don't have a list of what use cases they are actually interested in, what they need to support, and all of these things. And when we have those things, and when we come up with a new design for a new configuration system, we still need to find an incremental way of moving towards that new system, which can be a big challenge in and of itself, because we've learned the hard way that simply starting a big rewrite of a huge chunk and then just dumping it all in when it's ready, it's just not practical with so many users and so many diverse use cases. So I'm hoping to see more efforts in that direction to come up with maybe a list of requirements for this configuration system, a list of things that people are interested in, and some good design ideas on how to get started.
Question right there, and then here.
Okay. Well, guys, well, I know a few of you for a long time, so I'm going to ask you kind of less of a technical question and more personal. I think it makes sense. So, I came to OpenWrt like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and one thing that I like is that you're open source, all these things, but you're independent, and you've always been very helpful and friendly. I mean, some of you guys, I met you 10 years ago, you're still here, but how do you see yourselves in the future? I mean, how will you maintain OpenWrt through time, independent and with you guys or whoever it is in there?
Are you asking why they haven't been corrupted yet, or what?
Some of them not, for sure.
So for me, one of my main concerns with keeping up the work the way that I do was always to be able to do this while also getting paid for it without that affecting my work in a way that's contrary to the interests of the project. One thing that I hope to see in the future, and I don't really know how to get there yet, but I want to make it possible to get money flowing to people that are building things that are good for the community and the industry as well, in a way where the companies providing the source of funding don't have too much influence over how it's being done, because that should really be done by project rules. And I think this might also make it easier in the future to keep the project alive if people can actually get paid for doing community work. Yep. By the rules of the community. I guess this is the part that's tricky here.
And definitely, sorry Kathy, but just to mention, just all due respect to the big companies here, but I think it's a fair statement. I mean, we see all these big companies coming into OpenWrt and PurpleWrt and so on. I think we need to find a balance on how to keep this independent at the same time contribute both to open source and both to the companies and so on.
Yeah, I just want to give you my industry perspective. When I was at Qualcomm, I actually had a contract with Felix once, and I swear it took me probably 6 to 9 months just to get through red tape to get a contract that was maybe 10K. I mean, seriously, drove me bananas. And that was one of the reasons when Purple came up that I said, oh, let's see if I can just get Qualcomm to pay Purple, and then Purple can go direct to these developers. And that was one of the beauties of, we actually funded a bunch of work through the Purple Foundation, because believe it or not, just industry direct to a developer, really hard. They put all sorts of barriers in the way. So it's another thing. If your company allows you to do that, go for it, and you guys should highlight the projects that need funding, that need, even documentation. It's going to require some funding to get people to do that. There was Benjamin wanted to ask a question. Was there another one over here? Go ahead.
Yeah. So so when I was doing the packaging for those 0MQ stuff, I think I wanted at some point to submit a pull request to the packages repository, but then I run into the issue that some of the, there was some Node.js or package that couldn't build or was not building on MIPS architecture. I think there was a Samsung JavaScript project, which is like a Node.js interpreter. And I found that there was a lack, at least on my side, to have like some kind of PPA, the Ubuntu PPA, where I just push my stuff and there's some kind of a automatic build with the latest release over 10 different architecture. And as a package, someone who tried to make a package, it's very useful to see, okay, without any third-party intervention, without any second people looking at what I do, having like a tooling where you push your stuff, it builds to the latest release or to the latest trunk, and then at least you can see, okay, it builds or it doesn't build on this architecture. I successfully managed to produce a package or not. And I understand that you have this process where you make a pull request, but I don't see, I mean, I want to see something where the CI could be, made with or without a second person who's looking at the pull request itself for the package case.
I think this is a really useful thing to have, and we welcome additions to our build-bot infrastructure, because I think if we get more people to contribute build servers that operate on a reliable basis for a long period of time, then we can consider adding something like this. At the moment, we need our resources to build that we already have, and to start maybe building some staging trees which are used for integrating patches that we accept. And to be able to do something like this for PPAs, I think we need a lot more resources to even consider doing it this way.
Okay, there's one more over here.
So a lot of functionality is being exposed on UBuzz for IPC purposes, but there is also the need to expose it to the outside world, which can be achieved through UBuzz remote over HTTPS. My question is, do you think that this is a ready-to-go solution in terms of security, or do you foresee any issues or limitations? Additionally, I would like to understand how we can cope with events and notifications.
So for exposing things to the outside world, I guess it's a matter of finding a balance. I personally have a bit of an issue with exporting too many things from the local UBuzz to the outside world, because that creates some pretty tough security implications, especially regarding trust between devices. What I would prefer for solutions that can deal with this is to have something that's specialized for being able to only do the things that are needed for the actual use case, to keep the attack surface as low as possible. Regarding your other question, I think it's a pretty open question. Maybe we could have some with notifications.
So I've built this Daemon, which I'm going to push into GitHub and our Git server in the next couple of days. And it basically picks up lots of notifications or events and broadcasts them as UBuzz notifications. So you get notifications for the network events which are already there, and then you get notifications for Wi-Fi events, for ASOCs, dis-ASOCs, probe requests. You get notifications over UBuzz whenever there's ARP entry gets added or removed, neighborhood discovery of the bridge layer, logging, services, whole list of stuff, pretty much anything I could think of. And once that's published, if people have other events which they're interested in, they should just send me an email, and then we can add support for this as well. The stuff it supports right now is what I could think of and come up with. So if there's any missing events that people are interested in, they should contact me so we can add those as well.
Are you going to be around tomorrow? You can show it off?
Yes. Oh, and I've already also built a resource monitoring daemon. So you can, in UCI, define daemons, and whenever they get spawned, you can define thresholds of how much memory, FDs, and so on they can use. And it monitors the system's overall mutex and IPC usage and all those things. So that you can detect, well, there's nothing as annoying as one of those bugs in production where people say it randomly stops working after 90 days because you can't reproduce that quickly. And those, from my experience, tend to be resource leaks where after 90 days there are no free FDs left, or I don't know, the Unix IPCs have been exhausted and then it just stops working. And that daemon can trigger those things as well and notify you about leaks.
And one more.
So I'd like to congratulate the team on how quickly you guys turned the patch for the WPA2 crack attack vulnerability. So that was fantastic. But it was just a couple days, I think. But what I'd like to ask, and I'd like to let you guys put the industry on the spot without naming names, what are your expectations as how long it will take the industry to deploy that patch? I know Sentinel has already deployed, which is great. I love to see it, but what about the rest?
Probably never.
Exactly my point.
Yeah, and especially with this kind of attack, the biggest attack surface is on the clients themselves, and there's a lot more of them than the access points. And this is I think a pretty common issue is with Android phones. At some point, you don't get any updates anymore because it's up to each and individual manufacturer to even provide those and to provide security fixes. So I don't see this getting solved anytime soon.
And do you see that as a general symptom of our industry, or is it just this specific vulnerability?
I think it's a general theme of the industry that they have to keep turning out new products all the time, and they don't have the resources to care for them for the lifespan that they actually have in practice. So sometimes even after just a few months, the manufacturer stops caring about the product that they put out simply because they have the new one out and they want people to buy that one. And there's also the factor of many of these devices being so low cost and with such low margins that they simply don't have the resources to take care of all those different things that they put out. And it's hard to blame just the industry because it's also the consumers looking for the cheapest devices that they can get, and they kind of get what they pay for. It's a mix of both, I would say.
Thank you.
It's also a problem about how companies treating security in general. So for example, with Apple, and we are not talking about cheap devices. So Apple has a fix for the WPA2 bug in the beta versions of iOS, and they simply didn't push an update for the stable versions. So everyone who's using the stable versions, so millions of people, are still affected with that bug. And they have the fix for about 2 or 3 weeks now for the beta users. And until the new iOS version is released, none of the others will have access to it. So it's a problem with mentality as well.
Did you just have a comment on that? Okay, one quick comment. And we're going to have to wrap up for lunch.
Yeah, actually, when I started with Wi-Fi back in 2000, we were looking for the specification. And I remember the big trouble was that we couldn't get access to this IEEE 802.11b standard because it was like behind. You had to pay quite a lot of money for it. And one of the reasons why we have this WPA flow found by 2 Belgian researchers is that they kind of had access in some way to the specification for it, and they found it by having access to the actual specification. So one of the root problem behind IEEE is that all those standards are made behind closed doors, and you can't actually anybody can't actually dig into the security of Wi-Fi because just of this problem that the specification is behind closed doors.
I think Sci-Hub may have fixed part of this problem. The Sci-Hub where you can access all kinds of research papers and everything behind paywall, and I think it covers IEEE things as well.
Okay, we're going to wrap up here, and thank you guys for joining the panel. Give them all a hand. I just want to do some logistics announcements for the end of the day. You can see the schedule up there. After our lunch break, we have some talks with breaks and coffee breaks. We should wrap up around 5:30, and then you have time to go back and relax and change, and the social event is tonight. We'll show a map after the lunch break for how to get to that. I also want to just recommend coming back for day 2. There's going to be a lot of networking, talk to all these people. There's some great workshops. I want to advertise for at least one of them that I advocated for. The workshop on the integration of Platform.io with OpenWrt that shows the synergy between solving IoT problems and using OpenWrt as a hub. And then I also wanted to advertise that for the workshop, that Platform.io and OpenWrt, there was an Arduino Uno